Isn't love. Disagreement isn't hate. You're listening to Tactics with Caleb Colquitt. If you want to hear more, subscribe to him on YouTube, like him on Facebook, or follow him on Twitter at Tactics Radio. You're listening to Tactics with Caleb Colquitt. Tactics with Caleb Colquitt.
You think about it, Superman is like the embodiment of everything the left detests. He's extremely masculine. He's self-reliant. He is a white heterosexual Protestant, which, they can't stand that either. And on top of that, he's a very overtly messianic figure. Basically, he's living out American values. This is a private citizen who has absolutely nothing to gain from helping people, who says, I'm not going to wait for the government. I have the ability to help these people, therefore I will do it. That's who Superman is, and that's what America is. And they hate that.
Listen to Tactics with Caleb Colquitt, Thursday nights at 7 on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and TacticsRadio.com. You're listening to Tactics with Caleb Colquitt. America is divided as ever. How do you talk to your friends and neighbors about politics and religion in a way that doesn't devolve into yelling and pointless arguments? Luckily, Caleb Colquitt hosts the Tactics Podcast on Thursdays at 7 p.m. to teach you how to have thoughtful conversations about the hot-button issues of the day. As a national award-winning debater and gospel minister, Caleb knows how to discuss sensitive topics in a meaningful way. So subscribe to Tactics Radio on YouTube or like Tactics on Facebook so you can catch every episode and elevate your conversations today. You're listening to Tactics with Caleb Colquitt. Tactics with Caleb Colquitt.
Liberals seem to have a hard time understanding this, but when it comes to an economy, it's like a lake. If you throw a rock into a lake, it ripples out. Now, there's going to be some areas of the lake more affected by that than not, but when you throw a giant boulder into it, that affects the whole lake. You can't just affect one little part of the economy. It's all interconnected.
Listen to Tactics with Caleb Colquitt, Thursday nights at 7 on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and TacticsRadio.com.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Compromise where you can. Where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move. It is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say, no, you move.
Never step onto the battlefield of ideas unprepared. Before you enter the fray, you need a plan. And there's no better place to get one than right here on Tactics with host Caleb Colquitt. The Situation Room goes live now on News Radio 1440.
And good evening, everybody. Welcome to Tactics. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. And I know it's been a long time since I've actually done a show, being a grad student and having a new job as the esports head coach at Faulkner will do that to you. But, since it is election night, I figured I'd come on and do a little bit of coverage. We're probably not going to go super in depth, not to the level that I have done in the past, but just to give you kind of my take on the races and give you a little update on what's going on, we're going to go ahead and dive into that. It looks like right now that we've got roughly 32% of the precincts reporting, and that's part of the reason that I waited. Part of it was because I had class tonight. I was actually in my Gospel and Islam class. But what we have right now is we're looking at roughly 32% reported for the state of Alabama for our primary, and as you know, we've got several big races that are up right now. We have the Alabama Senate race. We have several state officers that are up for the election. We have several gubernatorial candidates, and some races are more interesting than others because of polling that we had beforehand. We kind of knew who was going to be winning. But I wanted to real quickly go ahead and give you what my predictions were before any of the reporting started. First of all, I predicted that Kay Ivey would win it walking away. Though that is not my choice, and I did not vote for her in the primary. I think that Kay Ivey will probably win and not even need a runoff. Now, I know that's a bold prediction. I know that polling-wise, she tended to be below the 50% mark, which would indicate that she will have to do a runoff against Tim James if recent polling is to be believed. Personally, I don't see that happening. Recent polling also showed that Mo Brooks had tightened to a very close second place when he had been third place initially behind David Perdue and Katie Britt. Katie Britt was leading. David Perdue was kind of close on her heels, and then the polls shifted, and then Mo Brooks wound up being in third place with, did I say David Perdue? I meant Mike Durant. David Perdue's in Georgia. It's a late night. I've had a lot of class tonight, so I've been using my brain a lot. And as you all know, if you've been fans of mine for a while, it does have its limits, and those limits aren't exactly all that high. So what we're going to be doing tonight is we're going to be looking at some of those races. There's been an interesting race to replace John Merrill as the Secretary of State. We've seen several different races that are going to be interesting, and of course, I did vote. Well, sorry, you'll learn my monitor's actually reversed, but I did vote. I have my little sticker. I saw actually some really cool ones. They had some Alabama flag stickers that were for the I voted stickers, and I believe those are if you're a veteran, which was pretty awesome. But anyway, so we've got all that going on. We've got several precincts, and it's important to note for those of you that are not quite as in depth on Alabama election law, the way that our runoff system works is if no candidate secures more than 50% of the vote, a runoff will be triggered automatically. And so the way that that works is if any candidate doesn't reach that threshold, then whoever comes in second place is in a mano, one versus one election, which will take place about, I think, 6 weeks from now. So we will see what that was happening. I will go ahead and predict that there will be a runoff in the Alabama Senate race. We'll see how that goes. So let's go ahead and look at some of the results that are being reported in. And we've since I've been talking, actually moved up to 34% reporting. So this is as it stands right now in the U.S. Senate. And by the way, this coverage is just what's being reported. I'm actually using the New York Times as my source here. So we're using their coverage, but they're getting the numbers just as quick as everybody else. And so right now you have Katie Britt at 45.2. You have Mo Brooks at 28.9 and Mike Durant at 23.1. So what that means is going to give you a little interpretation of the numbers here. So Katie Britt, you're seeing, has pretty much all of the ones that have been reported, but you'll also notice that you have several areas in the central part of the state that have not reported yet. You also have Mobile, which is not reported yet. What does that mean? Well, to be perfectly frank, that part doesn't look terribly good for Mo Brooks, because Mo Brooks is kind of like the Atlanta Braves have been in seasons past, where it seemed like they could not lose at home but sucked on the road. Now, that's not been the recent trend, but that's kind of what Mo Brooks is. And so Mo Brooks's wheelhouse is in the northern part of the state, and you can see that from that map. You'll notice that the only counties that have gone for Mo Brooks are in the northern part of the state. And Katie Britt has captured every other one that has reported. So the fact that Montgomery has not reported, the fact that Mobile has not reported, those are very big population centers in the state. It looks like Lee County has already reported, so that one seems to be in the books for Katie Britt, which frankly I kind of expected. But the fact that you've got those two population centers that have not reported yet, that looks very good for Katie Britt, because she'll probably win those. And there's a good chance that she's going to win several other counties before this is all said and done. Oh, look, we're actually getting live reporting coming in right now, and that looks good for Katie Britt. She goes up by 0.4%. So we're seeing her lead increase even more. However, you'll also notice that several of those counties in North Alabama are still gray. That's very good for Mo Brooks. I don't know which one would have the advantage here, but with that significant lead and the fact that Mobile and Montgomery, Baldwin County and Montgomery County have not reported yet, that means Katie Britt's probably got this one pretty solidly in the bag. What this race is at this point with 35% reporting is who is in the runoff. Because you'll notice there's not a huge gap between Mike Durant and Mo Brooks. However, I don't see any of these lower counties going really hard for Mike Durant. They're going to be places where Mo Brooks does not perform as well, but I think he'll still perform as good or better than Mike Durant in at least most of the counties that have not reported, and he'll probably win several of the counties that have not reported yet in the northern part of the state, which means that it is most likely that Mo Brooks, as it stands right now, will be in a runoff against Katie Britt. Now, maybe Katie Britt just absolutely creams him in the middle part of the state that has not reported yet. And if that happens, then she doesn't have to go to a runoff. Personally, I don't see that happening. Usually races tend to tighten the further on in the night that you go, because typically the ones that don't report are the ones where it is slightly more contentious. And Mo Brooks has been surging recently. And so it's kind of like, to use another baseball analogy, when a team gets hot at the end of the year, that's better than a team that did really well in the middle of the year and winds up in the playoffs because they were so far ahead at the All-Star break, something like that. Because typically what that means is the team is cooled off, and when they get into the playoffs, then they're not going to perform as well as the team that's just had the hot bats and the hot arms on the mound. And that seems to be what's going to happen with Mo Brooks. So you'll notice there that reporting that just happened, it wasn't a huge jump, but that actually cuts against what I was just saying, because Mike Durant actually gained in the reporting, whereas Mo Brooks lost a little bit and Katie Britt went up. Now, here's the thing. If we're talking about the candidates themselves and you want to give a breakdown of who they are and what they stand for, I think Mo Brooks is far and away the best option. I don't have anything personally against Mike Durant, don't have anything against Katie Britt personally. You've seen that their ads where they vow to be extremely pro-life and extremely pro-gun and pro-religious liberty and pro-constitution. Okay, that's all well and good, but here's the thing. That should be true of every Republican. That should be a baseline. I know that it's not always true, but that is not necessarily a feather in their cap. You should expect every Republican that runs to be pro-gun, pro-life, pro-free speech, pro-freedom of religion. Like, these are baseline things. I think what's going to happen if they wind up getting elected is you are going to see Katie Britt be basically a carbon copy of Richard Shelby. She has Shelby's endorsement. She was his chief of staff for a while. She's very well connected with the Shelby camp. He's been campaigning for her. Like, basically, she will just be Richard Shelby. Now, Richard Shelby replacing Richard Shelby is not necessarily a terrible thing. Richard Shelby is not a terrible senator. But the dude is the king of pork barrel spending, never saw spending that he didn't like, and has pretty much been a yes vote on several key liberty issues. Now, overall, he's still a good senator. He's still all those things that I just listed. He's still very good on the issue of life. He's still very good on the issue of religious liberty, freedom of speech, all those things. Like, I don't have to worry about Richard Shelby stabbing me in the back on those things. And so Senator Shelby has not done a terrible job. He's been a pretty good senator overall. If I were to give him a grade, he'd get maybe like a high C or a low B. So, not stellar, nothing to write home about, but certainly not a bad senator. And so I think that that's what you're going to get with Katie Britt. Mike Durant, a lot of people have kind of cast him in the role of John McCain because the guy is a veteran. He's kind of a war hero and has kind of used that as political capital to propel himself as far as he has in this race. And that's not necessarily a terrible thing. I mean, you want people of character that have served in the military in those positions. Barry Moore, a guy who I fervently support, who is a representative in the House right now, he's a veteran. I wish we had more veterans representing us in Washington. I think that that's actually a good thing. However, in Mike Durant's position, I think he tends to be a little bit more establishment Republican. Mo Brooks is a member of the Freedom Caucus. The guy has a absolutely stellar voting record when it comes to issues of liberty, when it comes to issues of limited government, federalism, increasing states' rights. There's a reason that he's endorsed by people like Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Freedom Works, Heritage. There's a reason all those people have him as the pick, and all the establishment types really want Katie Britt. Because Mitch McConnell knows he can play ball with Katie Britt, just like he could with her predecessor, her mentor, Richard Shelby. Like, whenever Mitch McConnell really needed something from Richard Shelby, he pretty much got it. Not to say that there were no exceptions to that, but the dude just went along to he'd go along with just about anything Mitch McConnell would ask him to do, more or less. And so Mitch McConnell would really love to have a Katie Britt, and the guy hates Mo Brooks. There's a reason that he sunk several $1,000,000 the last time he ran for Senate to torpedo his campaign, because the guy does not like Mo Brooks and does not want to have to deal with another Rand Paul or a Ted Cruz or a Mike Lee who sometimes votes against what he wants. That Katie Britt is the epitome of a swamp creature. Now, she is a right-leaning swamp creature, so that's better than, having Doug Jones or somebody like that in there, but that's setting the bar super low. So with that being said, let's go ahead and look at another race that's going on. Well, I guess we could go ahead and look at the Senate race for the Democrats. We'll look at the losers bracket here, and I say that because in Alabama, when you're running as a Democrat, even though there are exceptions, Doug Jones being one of them, typically you're running to decide who's going to get absolutely destroyed in the statewide election, and pretty darn one-sided right now. I don't see anybody being able to overtake Will Boyd in the state at this point. I mean, I know that that's only 16% reporting, so maybe, but it looks like Will Boyd. I mean, that's an extremely commanding lead. I know that it's not a huge amount reporting, and maybe that'll change as the night goes on, but that's a hard lead to overtake. It's kind of like being ahead by 3 or 4 touchdowns in the first quarter. Like, yeah, you got a lot of ball game to play, but if they were able to score that easily on you in the first quarter, the odds of you being able to make that ground up are not impossible, but not super likely. And so that's what we're looking at in that race right now. So let's go ahead and look at one of the biggest races. This is sort of a headliner for our state. Who is going to be the next governor of the state of Alabama? Now, I say it would not be the headliner because it's not as in contention as the Senate race is. However, we'll go ahead and look at those results now, and they are pretty one-sided. Now, you may recall, I predicted that Kay Ivey would win this walking away. She would get over 50%. Right now, we have 44% reporting, so we're not that far from the halfway mark. And Kay Ivey still has almost a 6-point lead, or 6 point over that 50% mark. So, I would say that this one is not done. Weird stuff could still happen. But considering all the areas that have reported, the only major population centers that look like they haven't are going to be Baldwin County. That's pretty much it. That's the only major population center left that hasn't reported. When you get those major population centers reporting, that means that you can't have, it would take a lot of counties now to overtake Kay Ivey's lead. And what I'm talking about is there's no way Kay Ivey doesn't win this. There is a small outside chance that one of her opponents is able to snag just enough votes away from her that she winds up not getting over 50%. But frankly, I do not see that happening. So unfortunately, it looks as though my prediction that Kay Ivey would win this one very, very easily is going to be, that one's probably going to come to fruition. So my take on this election, which probably doesn't matter that much anymore because we just saw how the results are looking, and so Kay Ivey's probably going to be the governor for another 4 years. Linda Blanchard says a lot of things that I agree with. Don't know that she'd be a terrible governor, but I don't really see a whole lot in her background that makes me think that she would be a true conservative. It's just my take. She seems a little bit more run of the mill. Maybe I'm being a little harsh on her. I don't know. Tim James is also not a great option. He's the person that I pulled the lever for. But honestly, there just were not a lot of good candidates. I think that most of the political movers and shakers in the state saw exactly what I saw, which is Kay Ivey so far ahead of this thing that there's just no way. Now, I personally think that's ridiculous. I don't know why Kay Ivey is doing so well, because after she straight up kept us in lockdown much longer than any other southern state, basically anything that Dr. Debbie Birx, who was Fauci's number 2 person in Washington, basically anything Debbie Birx asked her to do, she agreed to. If she asked her to jump, she asked how high. I mean, Kay Ivey is a whipping boy for Washington in a lot of ways. Now, don't get me wrong, she's got one of the best political ads out there with the "if you can't say something nice," and then, I mean, that's a great political ad. But when you actually dig into what she does in response to Washington versus what she says she'll do, it doesn't line up with those ads. And so, yes, I like the ads. Yes, they're very cute. Yes, they're clever. If I were KIV's political advisor, I mean, that's a stroke of genius. Whoever did that they knew what they were doing, because it plays into all of KIV's strengths, because it gives that whole Southern woman, you know, polite grandma charm that she's so famous for. And it plays into another one of her strengths, which is hiding from voters and not saying anything. So, like, literally not talking is her superpower. But anyway, so that's how we stand with KIV. And I tell you what, it looks like 49% are reporting, and KIV's lead has actually grown. Not enough to revisit that graphic, but yeah, KIV, I mean, I can't see her not being the governor for another 4 years with the way that this is reporting. I said that before the votes were being reported, and I say it now. So let's look at the losers bracket in Alabama. And so we'll go ahead and look at the way the Democrat primary is shaking out. Yolanda Flowers versus Malika Sanders Fortner. That one is interesting that it's so neck and neck. I don't think it's much going to matter, because whoever wins is going to get destroyed by KIV. So I don't know that makes much difference who wins. But you can see right there that it looks like Yolanda Flowers has a very slight lead. I don't know enough about the regional feelings of the Democrats in any of these places. Again, the only non-reporting precinct it looks like that has a major population center is Baldwin County. Or Mobile County. So, yeah. That one's too close to call. Really don't know what else to say about that one. I can't really give you a whole lot of insight on that, but that's what's going on. So let's go ahead and look at the District 5 race for the House. So let's go ahead and pull that up. Looks like we've got Del Strong with a pretty substantial lead right there at 42%. And because they don't have the interactive map, I can't really say, like, I don't know which precincts have announced and which ones haven't. So we'll just have to see on that. Honestly, don't know a whole lot about this race, and it's partly just because I've been out of the political game for a little while now because of pursuing my degree. So I haven't been able to keep up with the races that didn't directly affect me. And since my candidate is Barry Moore, I haven't really had a chance to look into those. But remember, this is District 5, so this is whoever will replace Mo Brooks, since he's not going to be in the House anymore. Not really sure which candidate is the best one in here. I've not had a chance to look over their where they stand on that. This is just looking at some of the general. It's sort of a catch-all for the other races that we're seeing here. Yeah, a lot of the races are actually going uncontested. Like, you can see Barry Moore there is, I mean, he's uncontested. You've got, interestingly enough, Rogers with an 82%. I mean, like, you just look at these races and there's not a whole lot of action. There's not a lot of interesting things going on in the House race this year. We've had some interesting ones in the past, but it doesn't really look like we have anything of note here. So let's go ahead and look at some of these primaries. It looks like Senator Arthur Orr, uncontested. We've got Grodinger, uncontested. So again, there's unfortunately not a ton of interesting races going on here. Another one, uncontested, Will Ainsworth. He's going to be our next lieutenant governor, so good for him. Love Lieutenant Governor Ainsworth, so look forward to another 4 years with him. The Attorney General, it looks like Steve Marshall is at 91%. So he's going to be able to take that one pretty handedly. I don't really see anybody coming up on his coattails, and he basically ran uncontested. I mean, yes, he had opponents, but I mean, Steve Marshall was going to win this one easy. Let's see. Allowed state park bonds. Now, again, I predicted that this one would win, and it would win very easily. I don't like the fact that it's going to win, but it's going to win. And so the reason that I don't like this particular amendment is a couple of reasons. First of all, I don't think it's a horrible idea. Like, it's not a massive abridgment of liberty if this thing passes. My default is always that I'm against amending the Constitution unless there's a very, very good reason. I know that that's a hard and fast rule that doesn't work all the time, especially when Alabama's Constitution is so long and incorporates so many different facets of our state government. And so it's harder to be that way in the state of Alabama, but I still stick to that rule. It's better to do nothing than to pass a bad bill. So that's my default. However, in this particular case, the reason that I'm against it is because you have to understand issuing bonds is like it basically is a tax on the future. Because what bonds do is they sell loans to investors who then buy the bonds looking to get a return on the bond in the future. They gain interest with those bonds, and then the taxpayer has to pay that bond back. Now, I'm not saying that they're always inherently bad, because there are some instances where I could be convinced that having bonds is a good idea. However, I think they're wildly overused both at the state level and the federal level. And on top of that, the issuing of bonds is essentially a tax on the future, because you are paying for something with credit that has to be paid for by future you. So it's not exactly the same thing, because the rate on credit cards is typically much higher than the rate of a government bond, but it's the same kind of difference that you have with your own family when you have to decide whether or not to pay for something with credit, or if you want to pay up front with your income, the money that you're bringing in from your job. Well, as much as I dislike increases in taxes, I would actually prefer a tax increase to issuing bonds, because all that is a tax increase on the future taxpayer. In my opinion, it's an extremely immoral way to run a government. And like I said, there may be some instances where it's justified, but in this case, I don't think it is. I believe that the limit that they've set on this one is 85 million, which will be used to supply and provide for state parks, that kind of thing. Kay Ivey is a supporter of it. She voiced her favor of it earlier. And I just don't see the need for that. I don't have anything against state parks per se, but I think they should be largely privately funded. And there's a lot of really good state parks out there. I've been to several of them. You have the Confederate Memorial Park, which was like 5 minutes away from my school. We went there all the time. You have Oak Mountain, which is up in the Birmingham area. You've got several public beaches in Gulf Shores. I mean, there's a lot of great state parks. And I understand needing to have resources to provide for them. But I really think that the best way to handle that is private funding. And I think that that's the best way to handle it. I think that it does not put an undue burden on the taxpayer. And I really do think that if we spent more money and more of those resources looking for people to fund it, rather than spending all those resources doing the maintenance ourselves, I think that it would actually be a lot better if we were able to handle that, or privatize the parks entirely. I would be fine with that as well. Some of these venues are really great, and I think do need to be preserved, but I disagree with the method that we're using to actually preserve them. And so that's really the reason that I was against this particular amendment. It's not because I'm against the parks, but I really don't like bonds, and I don't think that this is a good use of taxpayer money. So I'm going to go ahead and look down ballot. Let's go ahead and look at some of the other races that are going on down ballot. So we've got, let's see, Ainsworth, who is going to be our lieutenant governor. We've got Pate, who's the agriculture commissioner. Rick Pate, like, he's done a fairly good job so far. I've got really no complaints. The state auditor, now this is an interesting one, because Representative Andrew Sorrell, I did not expect to win this, but he's doing a good job. And remember that this is vacated by Jim Ziegler, who's running for John Merrill's old job, Secretary of State. And Andrew Sorrell is beating up on Cook pretty good. So good for Andrew Sorrell. I thought he'd be good for the job. He's the one that I voted for. And looks like a lot of Alabamians agree. Now, should be noted, this is not a ton of people reporting on this one. So this could change a lot. This is, This is like him scoring an early field goal in the first 3 minutes of the football game. So, it's a good sign. Definitely not final. Let's see, is there anything else under here that we can look at? Oh, Young Boozer for treasurer. Yeah, uncontested. That makes sense to me. Totally see that. Let's see. For the Supreme Court, Judge Jones is at 51% with Cook at 49. That's interesting. That is very early on. I don't know how well that one is going to go. It's interesting, though. All right, so let's go ahead and look at some of the results from earlier. Let's check back in on them. Looks like right here with the Senate, we now have 58% reporting. Katie Britt is at 45, Mo Brooks is at 28, and Mike Durant is at 23. So it's interesting. The closer we're getting to full reporting, oh, look, we have an update right now. -1 for Durant, minus 0.1 for Durant, plus 0.1 for Katie Britt. Mo Brooks stays the same. So what this means is the closer that we get to the final vote tally, and now we're almost at 60%, the more that it looks like some of those late polls. Now, for it to really resemble the late polls, what would have to happen is Mike Durant would have to drop down to right around the 20 mark, maybe closer to 19. And then Katie Britt would have to drop down a little bit more as well, and Mo Brooks increase by a point or two. But this is looking pretty much like the polls were saying earlier. Katie Britt is doing better, but she's definitely not blowing the doors off of Mo Brooks. So it looks like with that race, again, too early to tell, but probably going to be a runoff, and it's probably going to be between Katie Britt and Mo Brooks, which is what I predicted. So if that does happen, if that's the scenario that we're looking at, what does that mean for the race? Who is going to win if we do go into a runoff? Well, in a runoff, anything can happen. However, it is very rare that the person who got the most votes in the initial primary loses the runoff. When that does happen, and it does happen, not that often, but it does happen. When it happens, the reason that it happens is almost always that the people who no longer have that third option swing to the person who came in second. What are the odds that the majority of the people who voted for Mike Durant, if that winds up being the person who is no longer in the running, which numbers look like now, that's probably what's going to happen. What does that look like for Mo Brooks? Are a lot of Mike Durant people going to flock to Mo Brooks? I think the majority of them will. Because Katie Britt has the unfortunate position of being in the establishment camp. Now, the thing about the establishment camp is it's got a lot of money, it's got a lot of support. However, most of the people that vote for you because they're low information voters. I'm not trying to insult Katie Britt. I've met her. I think she's a fine human being. I don't think that she would have been nearly as good a senator as Mo Brooks, but I'm not saying this to disparage her. I'm just saying that she's kind of in that establishment lane. And typically when you get in that establishment lane, you get a whole bunch of people that vote for you because they recognize your name, and that's the only reason that they voted for you. I'm sorry. I'm sure that there's some people that legitimately love Katie Britt and know a lot about her and are voting for her, but that's not the majority of the people that are voting for her. When you have somebody that's outside the establishment and you get a big portion of them together, they're going to vote for whoever the non-establishment person is most of the time. Now, this race is one where there is no incumbent running, so that rule is less true. It's still true, but to a lesser extent. So what happens is, like, let's say that the election were at the end now. By the way, they're reporting the numbers and percentages haven't really changed much. Katie Britt's dropped off a little bit, but now that they're now at 62%, it's holding pretty much the pattern it was before. So if the numbers were to be called right now and you had Katie Britt at 45, that would mean that Mo Brooks would have to get almost all of the Mike Durant voters in the runoff. Almost all of them. Now, another thing that is going against Katie Britt is typically the people that turn out for establishment candidates are, like I said, low information voters. And what that typically means is you don't do as well in the runoff. Establishment candidates tend to taper off in runoff votes because they tend to get the low information voters that are less personally motivated than others. So if we go to a runoff, Mo Brooks is by no means out of this. Even if he loses by double digits, like if it were to close right now, that would mean Katie Britt won by 17% of the votes. But he only has to snag about 17 to 18% of Mike Durant's 23 to beat Katie Britt in the runoff. And it's going to be a smaller turnout, which means a lot of the Katie Britt voters probably aren't going to show up. And that's even more true if this winds up being the only major Republican runoff. And if the numbers work out the way that they are right now, that's probably going to be the case. Kay Ivey's probably going to walk away with this primary and not need people to show up for. See, that's a problem for Katie Britt, because a lot of your Kay Ivey voters are also probably a lot of your Katie Britt voters. And if they don't have the motivation to go out and vote for Kay Ivey, Katie Britt, which is a down ballot race, which means for most people it's less important, that means that she is not going to have the advantage of getting Kay Ivey voters motivated to go out and vote for Kay Ivey, and then when they look down ballot, oh, Katie Britt, I think I saw one of her ads on WSFA or something like that. I'm gonna mark for her because I recognize her face, or I recognize her neck, not her face. That would actually be kind of cool if they had their faces on the ballots. But anyway, not good for ugly people like me. Nonetheless, so there you have it. You've got 63% reporting there. I think that that's the scenario that you're looking at. I think that Katie Britt is going to win big tonight, probably by, I would think that the race would tighten as we get closer to the end, especially since we have some North Alabama counties, including, I believe, Mo Brooks' home county that has not reported yet. So you're going to see it tighten some, but not a ton. And then you're going to get in a runoff, and if that happens, Mo Brooks has a real shot. Not a great shot, but a good shot. He still has an uphill battle. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but he has a lot of factors working in his favor. In fact, every factor is working in his favor. I can't think of a single factor in the runoff that would favor Katie Britt. I mean, other than the fact that she just won more votes in the original primary, which, I mean, yes, that's a huge advantage, but that's not really something that is an inherent what's the word I'm looking for? Aspect of a runoff. So that's what we're looking at right now. Let's see. The Democrat primary remains largely unchanged. If anything, it's gotten even more. So, okay. So let's real quick zip back to the Republican primary for the governor's race. So the governor's race, it's looking like Kay Ivey is, Kay Ivey's lead just went up a little bit more. So we have 65% reporting. We have Kay Ivey at 51.1%. Yeah. So that's where we stand right now. Not really much going on there. I am surprised. I thought Tim James would do a little better. Like, he's by no means out of third place, but I figured he would probably come in a very close third, maybe second. And now he's back by about 4 percentage points. Little unexpected. Again, doesn't look like it's going to matter. It looks like Kay Ivey's going to walk away with this one without needing a runoff at all. Let's see what else we got here. Dale Strong, 59% reporting. Looks like he's going to be the man to replace Mo Brooks. All right, anything else that is on here? Mike Rogers. Yeah, Mike Rogers is destroying Blaylock. No surprise there. The dude has a massive war chest. He probably outspent Blaylock, I would say 10-1, if not more. So, huge advantage there. Adderholt's probably going to be returning. Gary Palmer going to be returning. Gary Palmer is kind of the silent Mo Brooks. Dude's an absolute rock star. excellent member of the Freedom Caucus, one of the best representatives in the country, in my opinion. He's just not on TV as much as Mo Brooks is. And you know what? That's fine. The man kind of keeps his head down, just does his job, and votes for liberty. I'm perfectly okay with that. Would love to have more Gary Palmers in the House. Let's see. Lewis or Butler Nelson. It doesn't look like there's a lot of contention. State House for Republicans in District 4, Moore versus Johnson. That one's surprisingly close. And with 44% reporting, there could definitely be more. But I don't know. It's hard to say. Ainsworth, Major. I mean, Marshall's still kicking Still's butt. I know that there's not much, but I mean, there's no way Marshall loses this one, in my opinion. Now, maybe we wake up tomorrow and we're all stunned and I was completely wrong. But Sorrell's still beating Cook by a pretty substantial margin. Let's see. Is there anything else? So this is a big one, which I'm surprised because Jim Ziegler was doing extremely well in the polls going into this and looked like he was going to walk away with it easy. Now, granted, you know, less than 1% is very low reporting. So the fact that they're basically neck and neck right now, I imagine that will change substantially within the next few hours. I'm surprised that they don't have more reporting there. That does seem odd. Maybe it's because just New York Times in general isn't as interested in that race. I don't know. But it looks like we're closing in on the 10 o'clock hour. So what's probably going to be going on here is you're going to see, I don't see any major elections that are close enough to call yet. But, you know, we'll see. We'll see. So one thing I'm going to try to do here is I'll take a look at some comments, see if we've got any comments or live reactions. It looks like we do have some likes and some people viewing, but I don't actually see a whole lot of comments. So maybe if I could find one. Oh, that's funny. I have one guy that lefty memes, long live communism. Okay. Like, oh, and his profile is Bernie Sanders. That's funny. Well, I don't know what to tell you. Obviously, that's not something I agree with, but you know, it is funny that my one response there happens to be. That's pretty funny. Let's see. Do I have any other comments? Oh, I do have Fred, buddy of mine, says, and special thanks to all the uninformed voters who voted. Just maybe a couple good ones will pull it out. Well, yeah. Brother Fred, I feel you there. You got a lot of uninformed voters, and I think the fact that Kay Ivey is doing so well is indicative of that. Because if you were to ask the average person if they agreed with all of the stuff that Kay Ivey has done, granted, Kay Ivey's not a horrible governor. She's not like the worst governor. You know, she's not a Governor Whitmer or, you know, Gavin Newsom in California, something like that. So she's not that. And I'm not trying to pretend like she is that. I actually do like Kay Ivey on a personal level. And there's some things she's done that I have cheered her on about. But as a general rule, like the whole COVID thing, the way that she is with Washington, she's the kind of politician that is wowed by prestige. And on top of that, like she never met a spending bill she didn't like. She never met a new tax she didn't like. And remember, when you go to the gas pump, I think that if you wanted to win this election, the most effective way to do it would not be yard signs and would not be TV ads. If I were Tim James or Blanchard or somebody else that was running against the governor, what I would have done, and I think that this would have given you a real shot, couldn't hurt compared to the job y'all are doing now. Print out stickers, just like the Joe Biden stickers that people are putting on gas pumps that say, I did that. Have one with Kay Ivey and have her saying, and I helped. Because remember, she was a big advocate of almost doubling the gas tax in the state of Alabama. And I know that that's not the reason for the surge in gas prices, but you are paying 8 to 10 cents more because of that gas tax with Kay Ivey. So I think an extremely effective way to just torpedo Kay Ivey's campaign would have been to have Kay Ivey stickers on gas pumps all across the state and encourage your people that you're campaigning to do that. I mean, you couldn't actively do that because that's actually illegal, and that's the reason that I don't put the stickers on there, because it's actually destruction of private property. So you couldn't have actually you could have distributed the stickers, but you couldn't have encouraged them to actually put it on gas pumps. But if people saw that, it would make them think, I'm paying $4.50 a gallon for gas. And if Kay Ivey hadn't passed her gas tax and actually had a special session to call people back to make sure that gas tax got passed, things would be a little cheaper now. I don't know if there's a way to translate this with the gas pump thing, but you could do the same thing with Amazon packages. Because remember, Kay Ivey was a big proponent of taxing your online purchases. Wanted to make sure that you were paying taxes on the stuff that you bought from Amazon and Etsy and all the other online retailers. You wouldn't have to pay that if it were not for Kay Ivey. Now, you can agree or disagree on that if you want, if you thought it was a good idea or it was necessary. I, of course, was not a fan of it. However, there are some good arguments on the other side, but regardless of that, whether the argument is good or not, if you can make the case to people that they are paying more money as a direct result of taxes like the online retail tax and like the gas tax that Governor Ivey supported, pushed for, and signed into law, and your family has less money in their budget after buying those things specifically because of the actions of Kay Ivey, that sticks with voters. That makes an impact on people. And so it would be interesting to see how that would have played out if there were a way to actually quantify that and to see how they would handle it. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other see if we've got anything else on here. Okay, so let's go ahead and real quick look at the election results again. I do want to have some victory and concession speeches on here if we go that late. I don't know if we will, but right now we're just not close to the point to where they can be called. So let's look at that. Yeah, Kay Ivey still with the same lead. Katie Britt with the same lead. Now we're going to start seeing a trickle. When we first started this broadcast, a lot of the results were very much like just sort of pouring in all at once. Now you're going to see it. Now you're going to start to see a trickle because people are just now getting the reporting in, and some of the later reporting counties are they're reporting late for a reason, essentially. And so that means that you're going to see it sort of slowly trickle in. Now, we're not Georgia, we're not Pennsylvania. We'll probably have an answer as to who won the election tonight, but it may not be early tonight. It may be a late night. So let's go ahead and see if that's the case. I'm going to look something up real quick just to see if there's any action going on. Yeah, there's currently no reporting on that. So we will keep a close eye on that. But right now, I'm just really not sure what we can do about it. Oh, so it actually looks like Katie Britt. Let's see. Can I get that coverage up here? Sorry, guys. I know you're having to deal with me here, but let's see. It looks like Katie Britt is speaking earlier today, and she's probably announcing that she's going to win, which is probably going to be the case. So let's go ahead and go to that real quick.
All the faces, this is so exciting. And this is all of Alabama. This is like corner to corner to corner. This is what it's all about. It is clear tonight that Alabamians want new blood. Yes. They want someone to go to Washington, D.C. and shake it up. It is clear that they want a true Christian, conservative Republican who believes in the America First agenda and doesn't just talk about it, but knows how to actually get something done.
Well, she's certainly fired up.
Who would have thought that this public school girl from the Wiregrass would be standing up here leading in the United States Senate race?
Okay, so she's wildly overacting this. Also, let this be a lesson to people that take signs to this thing. Don't hold them up in the middle of a speech.
I don't know what is. And what shows you is the American dream is live and well here in the state of Alabama. But when we look at what is happening in this nation, we don't recognize it anymore. And unfortunately, we have the liberal left that continues to try to strip that from underneath us. Folks, I have said enough is enough, right? Say it with me. Enough is enough. We live in the greatest nation on this globe, even on our worst day. And I want our children to be taught to stand for the flag and to love the United States of America. Am I right?
Okay, she's trying a little too hard to do like the Southern preacher thing, which is kind of a turnoff.
Faith, family, and freedom are unfortunately under attack.
But she's not wrong in what she's saying.
We're going to go to Washington, D.C. to protect. There is no doubt that every single day that Joe Biden is the president, we are weaker and more vulnerable as a nation. And do you know what I say to that? Game on. Because we know that we must fight for the American dream. We must fight for our children. Y'all, this race has never been about me. It has always been about Alabama. It has always been about the future of our state and the future of our great nation. And I am honored.
I love it when politicians say that while their name's plastered over everything.
And help make this happen. So in order to do that, we've talked a lot about this. We have traveled all across the state. We have been to every single county in Alabama. And let me tell you, we have a great state with great people. And
Amen.
we have a great story to tell.
Okay, quit with the head swivel thing. It's driving me nuts.
The people in Alabama know that what we have here in this state, our values, they're worth fighting for and worth protecting. I will say this, under Joe Biden's presidency, not only are we
Also, I love that her Goliath of a husband is standing right behind her.
In our nation under
Good dude, don't get me wrong.
Leadership. You know, whether
But he
it's
does
open
look
wars,
massive compared to
whether
her.
it's chaos overseas, skyrocketing violence across our nation, or inflation that is through the roof, his disastrous policies are the definition of America last. His radical agenda will be fatal for this nation if left unchecked. People miss the America First agenda. They miss the strength that was projected by President Trump overseas. People want us to return to our place in this world, and that is what we are fighting for. That's what Wesley and I have heard every single day on this campaign trail over the past 12 months. And y'all, can you believe it has been 12 months? Can you? Can you?
I can.
Look at her. She's like a cartoon character. And I'm not making fun of her. It's just she looks so tiny compared to her husband.
You have shared your struggles. You have shared your hopes and dreams and what you hope this nation will be for this generation that's sitting right here. Guys, this is about you. This is about preserving our nation for you. done this, our campaign has taken off because people know that I am the best to fight for our Christian conservative values. They know that I am the best leader to move us forward with the America First agenda. Folks,
Mo Brooks is much better qualified. I'm just going to be honest.
Down to the Gulf Coast, and that's the message we are going to continue to deliver.
By the way, 70% now reporting, and Katie Britt's lead is still at 45%.
In the Senate, rest assured that I will fight to secure our borders. And that starts with finishing the wall, putting back in the Remain in Mexico policy and the public charge, banning sanctuary cities, and truly putting America first.
See, now this is where she excels. She's specific.
What appears to be
You hear how she's specific on certain policies? This is because she is a swamp creature, but she knows what she's talking about.
Plan is actually worse than Obama's. Y'all, that's absurd, right? Right? And it's merely just one example of the way that he will say or do anything to benefit himself politically, no matter what the truth actually is.
Right, as opposed to you who rode Richard Shelby's coattails this whole time.
A career politician. And we have way too many of them in Washington, D.C.
You're a career politician.
It's not about Alabama. It's not about what's best for
Look, again, I don't have anything personally against Katie Britt, but her calling anyone a career politician is laughable.
We need people that will truly lead and elevate the people they serve. We know that actually the only border plan that was worse than Obama is actually the one that President Biden is putting in right now. So President Trump's
I don't know if it's worse. It's definitely the same.
Really is those are the policies, folks, we've got to get back to. So as we continue moving forward in this journey, I want to tell you this. We are going to keep working hard every single day to earn the vote of every single Alabamian. We're going to do it. Folks, we wouldn't be here without you. And so we're going to continue this momentum. We have 28 days to make this happen. The image and future of the state is on the ballot. I know that we've had enough of career politicians. So let's show back up on June 21st. Don't hate, unless you're not voting. I'll tell you what. June 21st, and let's make this happen. I want to tell you what I want to do in D.C. We must fight to secure our border. We must restart America and be energy independent. We must rein in spending. We must stand with our courageous law enforcement officers who leave the safety of their home every single day so we can return to ours. Folks, that's right. That's right.
You're watching special coverage.
Wait, who did she see that she just freaked out about?
That's Katie Britt giving her.
All right, so our friends at WSFA, our news partners there, I'm going to go ahead and switch back.
Angry-sounding candidate tonight, perhaps.
So, a couple things that I wanted to note there. The biggest problem I've got to say is Katie Britt calling Mo Brooks a career politician is laughably dumb. And that's because she has been a political pundit her entire adult life. Mo Brooks spent most of his adult life in the private sector and then got involved in politics later in life. Katie Britt has done nothing but politics the entire time. She, if I'm not mistaken, right after she graduated from college, she went directly to work in Washington. So the idea that, oh, Mo Brooks is the career politician and Katie Britt is, just a hometown girl that's never been involved in politics. I'm sorry, that's dumb. Like, when Tommy Tuberville said it, even though Tommy Tuberville was not my first pick, it was a legitimate attack against Jeff Sessions because that was a guy who had been in Washington for like 30 years. Tommy Tuberville had never held office. That attack made sense when he did it, even though I was pulling for Jeff Sessions. It makes no sense when Katie Britt says it. I mean, it could not make less sense. Oh, it looks like Mo Brooks is up now, so we'll go ahead and switch to him.
Oh. All right.
Thanks,
so,
WSFA. You lost the sound.
Sorry to interrupt that speech as well, but
all right. Well, hopefully, thanks to our partners at WSFA. Hopefully, they're going to be able to fix that shortly. I hope that is the case. but we will see where that goes. Oh, it looks like they've got Governor Kay Ivey, who is now stepping up to give her speech, which is interesting because, granted, she's still pretty far ahead, but I didn't think that she would be giving a victory speech this early just because they wanted to see whether or not she'd get into a runoff. But I guess that they determined that they didn't have to worry about that. So let's go ahead and look at the governor.
Campaign. I appreciate my opponents who wanted to step forward and serve Alabama, and I look forward to working with them to continue moving Alabama forward. Tonight, the
Very
people
cordial.
of Alabama spoke loud and clear in support of our conservative record of results.
Okay, so regardless of how you feel about Kay Ivey, you gotta love her voice. I mean, her voice is fantastic. She sounds like a grandma. And I don't mean that as an insult.
But y'all, there's still much more work to do. We're going to continue to grow jobs. We've created 65,000 and still counting. We're going to continue recruiting good businesses to our state. We've seen over $32 billion with a B dollars in new business investments. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the history of our state. And for the past 18 consecutive months, we have had the lowest unemployment rate in the entire Southeast.
Hey, credit to her. I don't think that that was really all her, but, you know, that is a truism.
I'm going to fight every day to continue making Alabama the best state in America to live, work, raise a family, and yes, play football.
Say what you want about Kay Ivey. She knows how to play to the base.
We know how it's done down here in sweet home Alabama, and we're going to keep at it. Well, tonight we celebrate, but tomorrow it's back to work. Tonight marks the end of one campaign and the beginning of yet another. And y'all, this is the most important one yet. The Democrats are going to try to do everything they can to take back the power in this state, and we cannot let them reverse the progress we've made here in Alabama.
I like that, turning their word on them.
I'm going to fight every single day to make sure the disaster we're seeing playing out in Washington under Joe Biden never takes root here in Alabama. I'm going to continue being President Biden's biggest roadblock. As I've said.
Well, a fine job you've done of that so far.
Bless his heart.
Okay, that's a good moment. It's a good line.
With your help, we're going to have
She still doesn't
an even
do much
bigger
to
victory in
oppose it,
November and keep Alabama working for 4 more years. Folks, there's no doubt that the best is yet to come here in Alabama because, as we all know, there's no step too high for a high stepper.
Well, it's good to see her in a good mood at least.
Thank you all so much, and may God continue to bless each of you and the great state of Alabama.
Short, sweet, congenial, pretty good speech. Overall, not bad, Governor. Still think she was not the best candidate in this race, but that was a pretty good victory speech. Not bad.
Governor Kay Ivey certainly stepping high tonight. She is very proud of herself as she...
All right. So let's go ahead and look at the results there, because when you do that, you'll understand why they went ahead and did the victory speeches. So let's go ahead and switch to that real quick for the governor's race. You'll see here in the governor's race, one of the things that you'll notice is that while it's true that there's only 73% reporting, it is still possible theoretically, for either Tim James or Blanchard to win. But look at that map, guys. Not only do you have 73% reporting, most of the counties that haven't reported yet are sparsely populated. You got a couple of them out in West Alabama. You've got a couple of them in South Alabama. You've got, is that Autauga County? No, it's not Autauga County. I don't know what I'm thinking. That's Autauga County is the north of Montgomery. Yeah, so really no big population centers, not even like moderate population centers left in the state. So there's really no chance that a big vote dump comes in that just like wildly propels Tim James or Linda Blanchard to getting enough to snipe away that last 5%. Because you think about it this way, this has been the trend all night. There were points where Kay Ivey was a little bit higher than she was. I remember seeing her as high as 59 or 58. But, and we've got 76 reporting now. But this trend has been more or less stagnant the entire night. There's been no reason to believe that either of the other two opponents, like, they've even not moved amongst themselves. There's really not been any danger of Tim James jumping ahead of Linda Blanchard for most of the night. It's been pretty much him at 15 and her at 19 most of the night. And so because of that, I think Governor Ivey's team looked at that and were saying, yeah, it's technically too close to call, but the odds of a comeback at this point are virtually non-existent. So to, again, put it in football terms, which as Kay Ivey so astutely pointed out, that's the way you talk to people in Alabama is you start talking football. I mean, know your audience, and to her credit, Kay Ivey gets it. She knows her audience. So with that being said, the reporting is at 76. So this is like when one team has a 3 or 4 touchdown lead in the third quarter. Technically, it's still possible for them to come back, but the odds of it are just not good, especially when really the score could be much higher. I know that that's not an exact one-to-one comparison here, but I mean, theoretically, Kay Ivey could lose. But here's the thing, she would have to lose 5% of the vote in counties that have traditionally, there's no reason to suspect that they may go for Blanchard or James. Now, maybe they win a county there, but even if they won a county, it wouldn't be a county with enough population to eke out Governor Ivey, and Kay Ivey would have to win almost no votes in those counties for them to make up a deficit that huge. On a technical level, still too close to call, but it looks like Kay Ivey is going to win and she is not going to need a runoff. That's probably going to be what we see there. So that being said, let's go ahead and check back in with the Senate race. All right, we're at 76% reporting now. And it looks like the only thing that has happened is that Katie Britt has slightly increased her lead, and Mo Brooks and Durant have actually decreased their share of the vote, which again would suggest that since we've got 76% voting, maybe Katie Britt could so ridiculously outperform the other two in the remaining, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I think it's 5 counties left. In fact, I'll just go ahead and pull that graphic up. So maybe Katie Britt so ridiculously outperforms the other two that somehow she winds up eking over that 50 percentile mark, but probably not. However, the fact that she has increased her lead doesn't really mean that the results will change, but it does suggest that Mo Brooks may have a little bit more work than beforehand. Now, granted, this doesn't wildly change the circumstances that I mentioned earlier as far as the advantages of who is and is not likely to be able to secure that vote. Oh, look, it actually, Mo Brooks just took a slight uptick, but now he's just back to 28.6, which he was at earlier tonight. In fact, I think he was a little higher than that at one point. So all he really did was gain ground he previously lost. Although, again, that does mean that he is significantly less likely. Well, significantly is too strong. He's less likely to dip any further. I don't really foresee him making a huge stride. He would have to, again, just so outperform her on every level. I think he's going to win at least one, if not two more counties, because some of the counties that have not reported, typically the late reporting counties are at least somewhat in contention. And so maybe he doesn't even necessarily win those counties. I think that he'll win at least one more. But even if he doesn't, he'll probably get a significant share of the votes in the remaining counties. And so because of that, he probably winds up performing even better than he had been previously. All right, so we just saw 78% reporting. It didn't really do anything to change the percentages. It just means that those numbers are closer to being set in stone. So let's check on some of the down ballot stuff. Let's see here. With 68% reporting, Del Strong still in a commanding lead. It looks like he will have to do a runoff, though. So it'll be Strong against Wardeninsky. However, I don't know. It just depends. See, the gap between Roberts and Wardeninsky is larger than the gap between Brooks and Durant. And what that means is that Mo Brooks has to secure a larger amount of the people who did not vote for him the first time than Wardeninsky would. But again, I haven't followed that district race super close, but you have to keep in mind that that is a much more regional, local race because it's a House district race instead of a statewide race. So the odds of that changing, I would say, are slightly less. Could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to say more than I'm qualified to say. I feel less qualified to talk about what's going on in North Alabama, so I just don't know the area as well, unfortunately. But that's where we are right now, and we'll see and keep monitoring. But you're probably going to get a runoff between Strong and Wardeninsky. I couldn't really see Roberts making a push big enough to eke himself into the second place position this late in the game, especially when he's about 7 points behind. That just seems very unlikely to me. Are there any other races that we need to take a look at? Yeah, it doesn't look like it really. Doesn't look like any particularly interesting ones on the state ballot. Marshall still, just absolutely obliterating Steele. I hate that they haven't updated some of these down ballot ones because I would really like to see where that's going. Oh, it looks like Tim James is giving his speech, so why don't we go ahead and cut to that real quick.
Face Don Carmichael, goodness, just so many people to try and sue. Who else? I don't even want to go down the list right now.
So this is a concession speech because he's not going to be able to make it to the runoff. It doesn't look like.
We'll have time to talk and reminisce.
And he's not even in second place.
About this great experience. It was a ride, you got to give it. And it ended in style on that big bus. It was,
okay, but if the big bus is the best thing you can point to as a success, that doesn't speak well for your campaign.
So, thank you, everyone. Brett Doster, there you are. Byron, everybody, what a great job. Great warriors, great fighters. Get up in the morning and get up the next day and fight and fight and fight. John Giles, there's just something special about that. Thank y'all. Everybody, go home, get some sleep, and get up tomorrow. The sun's going to shine. I promise. The sun shines. And tomorrow's a new day.
Well, there you
God
have it
bless
from Tim James. The
everyone.
sun is coming
Thank
up
you so
tomorrow.
much.
Breaking news. Stop the presses.
Tim
Tom,
James
I'm picking at
thanking
him.
his supporters after learning that he would not be in a runoff with the incumbent Governor Kay Ivey.
Yeah,
Both
it didn't pan
neither
out
he
so
nor
well.
Lindy
And I'm not
Blanchard,
making fun of him because, like I said, that was actually the guy I voted for. So, like, I don't relish that at all. I would have rather him been the governor than Kay Ivey. I would have actually rather a couple different people that were running for governor be governor than Kay Ivey. But, you know, very gentlemanly. Tim James, he has name recognition. He has a legacy. Maybe he'll show up in politics again. But, you know, I could have named off several people that I would have rather had running for governor instead of him. And ironically, in the last governor primary that we had three very good candidates, all of which I would probably have rather had running for office instead of Tim James. But I think most of the political movers and shakers in the state just looked at the landscape and said, look, Kay Ivey is going to be extremely difficult to beat. We just, there's not much chance that we're able to you know, subvert that. It looks like they're going to Steve Marshall's victory party now. So let's go ahead and switch to that. Well,
in the AG's office for the last 4 years. We've been very strong behind law enforcement and victims, making sure that we're that voice for community safety. And then beyond that is defending Alabama's sovereignty for those attacks against Alabama's ability to be able to govern itself. And so really pleased with the work of so many in our staff over the last 4 years to demonstrate that to the people of Alabama, and we've seen the results of that tonight.
And the work isn't done. Marshall will face Wendell Major, the only candidate to run for the Democratic nomination.
WSFA 12 News is
thank you.
Blanchard campaign. We just heard from Tim James, a concession speech from him. We believe that's what we're hearing from Lindy Blanchard as well. Let's listen in.
America. And we are all highly blessed and favored. And now, obviously, the people of Alabama have spoken.
I believe the phrase is blessed and highly favored, but, you know, basically
the grand old party, and we stick together no matter what, right? I do want to say it's been great. I've made friends for a lifetime on the trail that I would have never met. And what's amazing is that I'm looking forward to the next step, because guess what? When God closes a door, what happens? He opens another door, so who knows what
Where's
the
that in
future
Scripture?
holds. I'm real excited about that, but I do want to thank all my friends, my family, certainly Johnny, the kids.
Sometimes when God closes a door, he has
sisters,
his
my
judge
mom,
stab
my
you in the
dad,
stomach.
And
That's in the Bible.
most of all, the supporters, the Alabama people that really were pushing me through, and we thought we were going to go to a runoff, but God had a different plan, right? So here we are tonight, and I love all of y'all for supporting me, standing me up. That, you know, just like Tim said, there were ups and downs and all around, and that's part of a campaign. But you know what? It always ends that the people made it the best part, learning all the new people. And Alabama's beautiful, and we all love Alabama. We all want the best. We all want the best for Alabama.
Agreed. Golf applause.
And no matter what, Alabama will move forward, and we know that. I'm always going to be a team player, and if the governor needs help in any area, I'm always willing. I'm always going to step up for the children of this state. I've been doing it for 17 years, and it's been a pleasure and an honor, and I'll continue to do that. So reach out and just know, Governor Ivey, that we're on your team. We're all Republicans, and I wouldn't have had it any other way to meet such great people. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention my great team. And I've become to love all of them, and it's been the most educational journey because they're the experts. And I've really learned how that as a team you gel and you become family. And I'm going to miss my family.
This is very personal stuff, and frankly, I don't care about it.
I loved being on the trail with
Nothing
my
against
new
Lynn Blanchard.
family,
It's her moment. Let her say what she wants.
and,
But
hopefully another time, maybe in the future. So thank y'all so much, and God bless Alabama.
wasn't a bad speech. Lost me a little bit at the end, but I get it. You got to thank the people that helped you. All right.
Lindy Blanchard with quite an optimistic.
All right. So on that takeaway, I'll just say I find it refreshing that despite the variety of candidates and their political affiliations and a number of different factors, that when you hear from Republican candidates in the primary, you notice that there is a thread that goes through all of it, which is Alabama's a great place to live. It really is. The people are great. The state is beautiful. We're blessed with extremely abundant natural resources. There's a lot to love about our state. And that's true of the people that won, the people that lost, all the way through. It looks like Deborah Jones is trailing Greg Cook for the Supreme Court with 63% reporting. That's one that was not reported earlier. So, another update on the Secretary of State, Jim Ziegler is leading. He is 42% with 59 reporting. Wes Allen is hot on his tail with 40%. Looks like that will be a runoff. So we're probably looking at a runoff for the Secretary of State between Wes Allen and Jim Ziegler. I really hope Jim Ziegler is able to win it. It is still possible that he could theoretically get 8% more and be able to win that. I don't foresee that happening, just being honest. It looks like the auditor race, we have Andrew Sorrell at 42%. So that's with 59% reporting. So he will probably win it, but probably will also need a runoff. It's actually kind of surprising Rusty Glover coming in third. Would not have expected that, but it looks like he's going to come in third. With 53% reporting, the amendment has a 77% yes. So, yeah, even with only about half the state reporting, the odds of that being voted down probably non-existent. And it's unfortunate, but basically every constitutional amendment wins every time it goes on the ballot. There are exceptions, but unfortunately, there's a lot of low information voters that just stamp yes on whatever constitutional amendment pops up. So there you have it. Anyway, so getting back to what I was saying earlier, do you notice that when you do listen to Democrats and when they're talking about the state, they can't say enough bad about the state? They talk about how horrible it is and how backwards we are and how evil and racist and sexist Alabama is. Same thing happens in other states in the Southeast. I remember Stacey Abrams was speaking yesterday because she's running for governor again so she can, lose to either Brian Kemp or David Perdue, whoever winds up on top tonight. But she was saying that she's just so tired of hearing that Georgia is the best place to do business and the worst place in the country to live. And I'm like, really? Georgia's the worst place to live? You're wading through hobo feces in San Francisco, but Georgia's the place you don't want to go? I mean, don't get me wrong, there's parts of Georgia I don't like either. Lord knows there's no force on earth strong enough to get me to go to Atlanta that isn't a Braves game. But my point in all of that is that there's just such a negative outlook on everything when it comes to the Democrats if they happen to be from a red state, or even in Georgia, a red state that's somewhat trending purple. And that's the way it is with the country, too. When they run for national office, they talk about how terrible America is and how we're so far behind the times and we need to be more like Europe and all this other stuff. They don't seem to like the country they want to represent. They don't seem to really like the people they want to represent. They might like the people that support them, but they'll pay lip service like Joe Biden did to being a president for all the people. But then the second that he gets into office, he's like, well, yes, I'm the president to all the people, but there's a bunch of evil, hateful Klansmen, and that's like half the country are a bunch of racists that would just as soon see black people not exist anymore. And I'm like, no, that's not true. I understand you might have some disagreements with some people on the right, but they're not all genocidal maniacs. That's not a fair comparison. And you don't see that as much with people on the right. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that there is actually a sense of pride and patriotism and a desire to see the country do well and an idea that, you know, this is a pretty great place to live and we're proud to be from here. I'll never forget that in that one race where Doug Jones wound up winning, how he talked about how, let's be honest, all of us are a little ashamed to admit we're from Alabama. I'm not. And I frankly don't know anybody that is. I love being from Alabama. And then there was I can't even remember her name now because she wound up getting shellacked in the election, but you had that one girl out of Lee County that was running as a Democrat that was like a former pageant queen or something like that, that talked about how Alabama is like the worst state in the country to live. And I don't get where the negativity comes from. I mean, we're one of the wealthiest, even in Alabama, which is not one of the wealthiest states in the country. We are, by virtue of being where we are, the wealthiest human beings that have ever lived on the face of planet Earth. We have so much at our disposal, and God has blessed us so abundantly. I just don't see how somebody can look at all that and be like, oh, it's a terrible place to live. I'm sorry, it's just not. I mean, 100 years ago, we were just starting to get a handle on aviation. And now we're talking about trying to plan a trip to Mars and have commercial space flights. I mean, it's just incredible how quick all of this has happened. And there just seems to be no appreciation from the left on that. Okay, so let's do a quick look back through some of the numbers because some of them have updated. So we're going to go ahead and look at that real quick. And I think we're probably going to call it a night here pretty soon. So with 79% reporting, they've already called the race for Katie Britt and Mo Brooks for being in the runoff. That's probably accurate. I don't disagree with that. I would have, like I said, I was pretty much saying that that was in the books a while ago, and they're right to call it. It's interesting that actually Tim James wound up winning Elmore County, and just Elmore County. So he actually eked ahead to second place ahead of Linda Blanchard. But the thing is, it's way too far gone for it to matter. So despite the fact that he actually will wind up finishing probably in second place as opposed to third place with 85% reporting, it just ain't going to be enough. You know, props to Tim James for being able to win Elmore County, but I know that they're not officially going to call it yet, and they shouldn't because she still has only about 2.4% to play with. And, you know, that's a big difference from the 5 percentage points the last time we looked. But realistically, there's not much chance that Kay Ivey has to go to a runoff. Let's see, the Democrat primary, yeah, they're going to wind up in a runoff. That's correct to call it then. Dale Strong, probably going to wind up in a runoff against Wardeninsky. Let's see, are there any other interesting ones? Doesn't look like it. Constitutional amendment's going to pass. Andrew Sorrell probably going to win. Like I said, this reporting's a little bit dated for state auditor. It looks like Andrew Sorrell is ahead, but Cook is really close on his tail, so they're going to wind up going to a runoff. Doesn't look like there's anything else that needs reporting that I haven't already spoken to. The Supreme Court race is actually going to be probably the closest race of the night, so that is interesting. But that's where we stand right now. Overall, if I had to give a rating to the primary, obviously I did not want Kay Ivey to win. I was really hoping for somebody else, but the other options weren't exactly great. So, oh wait, it looks like they've got Mo Brooks up, so why don't we switch to him real quick? Okay, that was just a clip.
He says this runoff is really a battle for the Republican Party, and he questions Britt's values. He also bashed the ads that the Britt campaign put out targeting him. Val?
Yeah, there have been several
pretty par for
nasty
the course
in the Senate race in general. Brady Talbot reporting live from Huntsville for us tonight, and the Mo Brooks campaign. We also want to show you the Democratic results in this race.
All right, so that's basically where you stand. Tell you what, it's getting pretty late, and I know that most people have probably already dropped off. And on top of that, it doesn't really look like there's any elections that are going to swing one way or the other at this point. We've got roughly anywhere from 50 to 80% reporting in most of the races, so that's probably where you're going to end up. Overall, with the night, I would say Kay Ivey winning. Obviously not ideal. I would have loved to have seen her get into a runoff with one of her opponents. By the way, on that race, I just saw an update. They just updated the graphic here. It turns out that they actually flipped that one county that Tim James had allegedly won, Elmore, and now it went for Kay Ivey, and so we're back to Kay Ivey with 55% of the vote. So it's basically beyond question now with 80% reporting. There's just no way that Kay Ivey has to go to a runoff, and Tim James is back in third place. So, like the third time I've tried to start this now. My summary of the night, really wish that somebody other than Kay Ivey had taken the helm of the state. Sad that she's going to be at the helm, but you know, Kay Ivey is not a disaster area. I still think that she needs to pay a political price for closing down churches and trying to shut down the state and basically doing everything that Washington told her to do when it came to COVID and the taxes and all the spending that she's approved and all the myriad of other things that I disagree with Kay Ivey on. But she's still not a terrible governor. Alabama will still be fine. It's not going to be a disaster with Kay Ivey at the helm. It just won't be ideal. So you move on to the Senate race. You got Mo Brooks probably going to wind up being the one in the runoff. It looks as though, and they've already called the race, and like I said, I agree with them calling it at this point because of the results being basically out of reach for it to shift. He had a big enough lead on Mike Durant for about 5 percentage points with 80% reporting that he's probably going to win it. He won several counties in North Alabama. And I think that lead will actually tighten. I think you're going to see Katie Britt at below 45% by the end of the night, but it's not going to change enough to make a difference on that. They're going to wind up in a runoff. It's going to be Brooks versus Britt. If Katie Britt wins and she becomes the nominee and she becomes the senator, which is the most likely outcome at this point, still think Mo Brooks has a very real shot. Katie Britt cannot rest on her laurels. It's going to be a tough runoff, and I think that Mo Brooks will definitely outperform himself tonight without other people to take away part of that vote. But here's the thing. He'd need to take almost all of Mike Durant's votes to be able to beat Katie Britt. He'd have to take, because he's at 28% now, she's at 45%. That means he has to have, at minimum, about a 17-ish percent swing in his favor. So he's got to get most of Mike Durant's votes. Not all of them, but most of them. And he has a lot of things working in his favor. But it's still an uphill battle. The most likely outcome is that Katie Britt is our senator. Not the outcome I would have wanted, but if that does take place, we still get basically a carbon copy, a clone of Richard Shelby. If that happens, that's not the end of the world either. She's still going to be probably very good on a lot of the social issues like abortion, like gun rights, like your constitutionalism. She's probably going to be very bad on issues of federalism, state control, economic policy. She won't be in favor of a lot of the, Democrats wanting to spend $80 trillion on AOC's haircut. She's not going to be in favor of dumb stuff like that, but she'll only oppose the most egregious of those things. When the Democrats want to spend a lot of money, but we'll give you a couple billion or a couple million here or there, or maybe even $1 billion for you to bring that back so you'll play ball with us, she'll probably follow in the footsteps of Richard Shelby and do what they ask her to do, that she'll approve that budget because she's getting a little pork on the side to be able to bring back to her state and say, hey, that new bridge that we built, yeah, that was me. So if that happens, that's what I'm imagining Katie Britt is going to do. So not ideal, but not a disaster area. So overall, not a terrible showing, kind of what you would expect for the state of Alabama. No real big surprises. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll go ahead and look at this real quick, I think every single prediction I made wound up coming out correct. And it's not because I'm a genius or whatever, it's just that's what the polls were showing. The only one that I was a little bit bold on because I was pretty convinced this would happen is the polls were showing that Kay Ivey would have to go to a runoff. I predicted that she would not. And that's just because I know the people of Alabama and I know who comes out for elections. So Kay Ivey, these were my predictions. Kay Ivey will win with no runoff. That one wound up being true. Katie Britt will win with Mo Brooks in a close second. Okay, so that one I was a little bit wrong on because he is in second, but he's 17 points behind her. That's not really a close second. So I thought that Mo Brooks would close that gap more than he did, and I still think he'll close that gap more before the night's over, but probably not enough to make it to qualify as a close second. It's probably going to be a pretty distant second. Still got a shot, can still win this race, but he's got a long way to go. It's going to be a heavy lift. Jim Ziegler wins the Secretary of State nomination. It looks as though that will be true. That has not been decided yet. He probably will. Joy Booth will win as circuit judge, probably, but still in contention. Will Dismukes will win by double digits. Don't know about that one. In fact, I don't know if I'm pretty sure that the results that we were looking at didn't even cover that one. Let's look at that one real quick. No, that's U.S. House. All right, State House. Let's see. Let's see. He's 81, so let's scroll down there. Oh, wait, they redistrict, so they've moved him now. All right, well. Oh, come on, he's got to be in here somewhere. Sorry, I know that this is not exactly thrilling viewing for all of you. I apologize for that. Let's go ahead and look at that real quick. Yeah, it looks like they've only really marked the uncontested ones. Will Sellers, it looks like he's going to win. All right, let's see here. Oh, wow. Okay, so this is actually one of the few predictions that might go not my way. It looks like the Dismukes race is still too close to call. And so we've got Starnes, who is apparently at 51% with 48% reporting. So Will Dismukes might lose this one. And if so, that probably has to do with the scandal. There was allegations. There were two scandals, and I'm using kind of air fingers quotes there. The first one was there was allegations that he was stealing money or essentially using state money to funnel through his business. I really didn't see a lot of strong evidence for that, so I kind of dismissed it. The other one was that he wound up, there was a picture of him holding a rebel flag. I didn't really see that as a big deal. I understand that it bothers and offends some people, but I really didn't think that with people of his district it would make a huge difference. But apparently maybe it did, because Starnes is making a much bigger impact than I thought that he would. But that's where it stands right now. So let's go ahead and expand the Senate as well. I don't see any races there that look particularly interesting that are still in contention. Yeah, All Britain's probably going to win that one. I couldn't see Beasley losing that one. He'll probably, that will stay the way that it is. So there you have it. I think that's pretty much where we're going to leave it for the night. Overall, not a terrible night. It's not like Alabama's going to be a disaster zone. It's still got very strong ties and tends to be very conservative as a conservative people. I just don't really foresee this one changing much at this point, so I appreciate it. It's been fun hanging out with you guys tonight and looking at the results. I can't promise this, but I'll try to, for the runoff, do some kind of show to cover that, just if I have time. But anyway, I appreciate it. It's been fun, and we'll go ahead and call it a night here. In the meantime, stay the course, friends. Okay, for some reason my credits are not rolling. Let's see what's going on with that. Sorry about that. Huh. Well, it appears as though I have frozen up. Let's try this again.
Thank you for listening to the Tactics Podcast. Tactics is a production of Not Ashamed Media. Any opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of our business partners or sponsors. Graphics by Jessica Dawson. Video production by Jackson Dean. Broadcast studio provided by Faulkner University. Location studio provided by Del Reyta Church of Christ. Copyright 2021.